The city never slept. Bright towers lit the night sky, their glass windows glittering like jewels. Expensive cars rolled smoothly down the main roads, engines purring like lions. But in the cracks of that shining city, another world lived, one filled with silence, hunger, and shadows. 17-year-old Aaliyah lay on a thin mattress in an abandoned garage, her backpack serving as a pillow. Her jeans were torn, her hands rough with grease, and her hair pulled back in a messy braid. To anyone passing by, she was just another forgotten girl drifting through the streets. But Aaliyah carried something inside her that the city didn't see. Sharp eyes, quick hands, and a mind that understood engines the way other kids understood books. Her father had taught her everything. She remembered sitting beside him in his old auto shop, watching his hands work magic under the hood of broken-down cars. "Your hands can build more than machines, baby," he used to say. "They can build respect." But respect had been taken from him when wealthier white competitors stole his clients and smeared his name until the shop closed. He never recovered, and neither did their family. Now it was just Aaliyah carrying his lessons in a city that looked right through her. She tightened her jacket and whispered into the darkness, "I'll make it one day, Dad. You'll see." Across the city, Victor Langston adjusted the cuffs of his $1,000 suit. The billionaire leaned against his prized silver luxury car, smirking as his driver polished the hood. Tonight was important. He was headed to a gala filled with investors, the kind of event where money wasn't just shown off. It was worshipped. Victor liked power. He liked control. And most of all, he liked reminding people below him that they would never rise to his level. To him, people like Aaliyah were lazy, unworthy, and responsible for their own struggles. But arrogance has a way of meeting its match. As Victor climbed into the back seat of his car, the engine sputtered, coughed, and then fell silent. His driver tried again, twisting the key, but the only sound was a pathetic wheeze. Victor's smile collapsed. "What do you mean it won't start?" he barked. "This car costs more than most people's houses." The driver stammered, checking gauges. I don't know, sir. It was fine this morning." Victor slammed his hand against the leather seat, rage bubbling in his chest. "It better be fine again in 5 minutes. I'm not walking into that gala like some fool." The car sat dead in the middle of the city's bright street, a monument to his frustration. People passing by slowed to stare, some whispering. Victor hated the eyes on him, hated looking vulnerable. From the corner of the sidewalk, Aaliyah, carrying her backpack of scraps, stopped. Her head tilted as she listened to the dying cough of the engine. She knew that sound. She had fixed it before, 10 times over in her father's shop. She took a cautious step closer. "It's the fuel line," she said softly, but loud enough for the driver to hear. Both Victor and the driver turned, their eyes landing on the thin girl in worn clothes. Victor's lip curled in disgust. "What do you want?" "Spare change." Aaliyah's voice shook, but she stood her ground. "No, I'm saying your engine won't run because the fuel line's clogged. You'll need to—" Victor cut her off with a laugh, sharp and cruel. "And you know this how? From fixing bicycles in the gutter?" His driver looked uncertain, but Victor's pride burned hotter than reason. He waved his hand dismissively. "Get lost, girl." "Don't waste my time." Aaliyah's face flushed, but she clenched her jaw. "I know what I'm talking about. I said go," Victor snapped, his voice echoing off the glass buildings. For a moment, the silence that followed was heavier than the car itself. Aaliyah turned, backpack slung over her shoulder, her chest burning with humiliation. Behind her, Victor pulled out his phone, already calling a professional mechanic, refusing to believe that anyone like her could possibly matter. But the night had only just begun, and before it was over, both their lives would be changed forever. Victor's voice carried sharpness that sliced through the night. He hated feeling powerless, and right now his sleek, expensive machine had betrayed him. He leaned back in the seat, glaring at his driver as though sheer anger could make the car roar back to life. Aaliyah hadn't walked far. She lingered near the edge of the curb, hands stuffed in her pockets, trying to calm the heat rising in her chest. She had offered help, not charity, but the sting of Victor's words cut deep. Still, she couldn't shake the sound of that engine sputtering. She knew she could fix it faster than any mechanic he might call. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Never let anyone tell you your hands aren't worth something." She turned back. "Sir," she said, trying again. You'll wait hours for a mechanic, but I can get it running in 15 minutes. Victor's laugh was sharp, cruel, and loud enough for bystanders to hear. 15 minutes? What, with duct tape and a prayer? He gestured toward her backpack. What could a homeless girl possibly know about an engine worth more than her entire life? A small crowd began to form. Some people chuckled, others shook their heads. The driver looked down at his shoes, clearly uncomfortable. Aaliyah stood frozen, humiliation climbing her throat. I've been fixing engines since I was 10, she whispered, her voice trembling. My father was a mechanic. He taught me everything. I know what I'm talking about. Victor stepped out of the car now, towering over her with polished shoes and a cold stare. Listen closely, he said, his words dripping with condescension. You belong out here on the sidewalk, not near this. Stay in your lane. Her cheeks burned hot as the words landed. People in the crowd looked at her the same way Victor did, like she was nothing more than a stray. She wanted to argue, to scream that she did know what she was talking about, but her throat tightened until no words came out. Minutes later, headlights swept the street as the professional mechanic arrived. He popped the hood, poked around, then nodded slowly. Fuel line's clogged, he confirmed. Easy fix. Victor's smirk faltered for just a second. He flicked his gaze toward Aaliyah, who stood quietly at the edge of the crowd, her fists clenched. He knew she had been right, but pride kept his mouth shut. Well, the mechanic asked. Fix it, Victor barked. He turned back to the driver. And next time, don't let random kids loiter around my car. The driver gave a small nod. But his eyes darted toward Aaliyah with something else. Pity. Maybe even respect. The crowd began to scatter once the excitement ended. But Aaliyah remained still, her chest aching with a mix of rage and shame. She had been right, but being right hadn't mattered. She had been invisible when she offered her knowledge, and visible only when mocked. She turned and walked away quickly, her backpack bouncing lightly against her shoulder. She didn't notice the security guard from across the street, Maria, watching the entire exchange. Maria's eyes narrowed at Victor's arrogance, then softened as they followed Aaliyah's retreating figure. Maria whispered under her breath, That girl's got something. But Aaliyah didn't hear. All she could hear were Victor's words repeating in her head. Stay in your lane. The night air felt heavier than usual as Aaliyah hurried back to the garage she called home. Her steps echoed against the cracked pavement, each one carrying the weight of Victor's words. Stay in your lane. They echoed like chains, wrapping around her chest, pulling tighter with every breath. She pushed open the rusted door of the garage and dropped her backpack in the corner. The space smelled of oil, dust, and rain-soaked concrete. A single bulb flickered overhead, barely holding on. Aaliyah sank to the ground beside an old tool chest, her head resting against her knees. Her father's photograph stared back at her from the wall, a younger man in grease-stained overalls, smiling proudly with a wrench in hand. She reached out, brushing her fingers across the faded surface. They think I'm nothing, Dad, she whispered, her voice breaking. I tried. I knew the answer. I was right, but it didn't matter. Memories came rushing back. Her father being underpaid by wealthy clients who trusted him to fix their cars, but never trusted him enough to pay fair. The whispered words he thought she hadn't heard. Don't go to his shop, he's not reliable. You know how they are. It wasn't just tonight. It was years of being dismissed before she even opened her mouth. She slammed her fist against the floor, tears stinging her eyes. What's the point of knowing anything if nobody will ever listen? Silence answered her. Aaliyah leaned back, staring at the ceiling beams. Doubt crept in, sharp and relentless. Maybe Victor was right. Maybe she was just a homeless girl with grease-stained hands and nothing to her name. The thought hollowed her out, leaving her numb. Across town, Victor clinked a glass of champagne at the gala, a tight smile plastered on his face. Laughter and music filled the room, but none of it reached him. He replayed the moment at the car, the girl's certainty, the way she had spoken as if she knew. And then the mechanic confirming her word. For the briefest moment, Victor had felt foolish, powerless, and he hated it. He straightened his shoulders, forcing the thought away. Pride demanded that he bury it. So he bragged louder, flashing his money like armor, pretending he was untouchable. But behind closed doors, when the night ended and he removed his jacket, he caught his reflection in the mirror and frowned. His wealth had bought him everything but respect that wasn't tied to his bank account. Without his empire, who was he? In two different corners of the city, both Aaliyah and Victor wrestled with chains. One was bound by poverty and prejudice, the other by arrogance and pride. Neither of them knew that soon their worlds would collide again, and this time the stakes would be far higher. Aaliyah lay back on her mattress, gripping her father's words in her memory. Your hands can build more than machines, baby. They can build respect, but respect felt far away. Tonight all she felt was small, invisible. Still, somewhere beneath the shame and doubt, a spark of defiance smoldered. She didn't know when or how, but she couldn't let the city bury her voice forever. 3 days passed. The city moved on as if nothing had happened, but Aaliyah hadn't. The memory of Victor's laughter still clung to her, the sting of his words replaying every time she tried to close her eyes. She had buried herself in scraps of old engines, trying to remind herself that her skills were real, that she wasn't crazy, but each twist of the wrench felt heavier, as though the world had placed doubt in her very hands. One afternoon, desperate for food, she wandered near the private airport hangars, where the trash bins sometimes held half-eaten sandwiches from wealthy passengers. The sound of shouting caught her attention. "Ground the jet now," a man yelled. "If we can't fix this, the whole deal is off." Curiosity pulled her closer. Through the chain-link fence, she saw a group of men in uniforms swarming around a sleek luxury jet. Panic buzzed in their voices. She heard phrases like engine failure, loss of compression, and impossible timeline. Her ears perked. She knew that language. She knew engines. She pressed herself against the fence, listening harder. The sound of a whining turbine cut through the air, stuttering like a wounded animal. Her instincts fired. She'd heard that sound before, not in planes but in high-performance cars. The problem was clear. Her heart pounded. She could fix it. She knew exactly what was wrong. But then came the doubt. Her stomach turned cold. What if she tried again and they laughed? What if it was worse than the humiliation at the car? She imagined Victor's sneer, the crowd's silence, her shame. The weight of it almost dragged her back into the shadows. That's when a familiar voice broke through. "You again?" Aaliyah turned sharply. Maria, the security guard from the night at the car, stood nearby with her hands tucked into her vest. Her eyes softened as she studied the girl. "You were right that night," Maria said quietly. "I saw it. Everyone else ignored you, but you called it before the mechanic even showed." Aaliyah lowered her gaze. "Didn't matter. Nobody cared." Maria stepped closer, her tone firm but kind. "It matters now. They're out there losing their minds over that jet, and you look like you know something." Aaliyah's throat tightened. "What if they don't listen? What if I just get humiliated again?" Maria tilted her head, her voice dropping low. "Listen, kid. Life will give you 1,000 chances to stay silent. But sometimes speaking up once can change everything. Don't let that man silence you twice." The words struck something deep inside Aaliyah. She looked back at the jet, the polished metal gleaming under the afternoon sun. Her father's voice whispered in her mind. "Your hands can build respect." She swallowed hard, nerves twisting her stomach into knots. Her feet felt heavy as she stepped through the open gate Maria held for her. Each step toward the frantic crew felt like stepping onto thin ice. As she approached, one of the mechanics barked, "Authorized personnel only." "Get back." But then Victor's voice cut through the air, and Aaliyah froze. He was there, standing near the hangar doors, his suit crisp as ever, his expression tight with frustration. His gaze snapped to her, and recognition flashed instantly. "You?" He spat. His laugh was cruel and disbelieving. "Of all people, you show up again?" The crew turned to look. Some chuckled, others frowned in confusion. Aaliyah's knees wobbled, but she stood her ground. "I know what's wrong with your engine." Victor's eyes widened with disbelief before narrowing into scorn. "This again? Haven't you embarrassed yourself enough?" Maria stepped in, her voice sharp. "Maybe you should listen this time. What do you have to lose?" Victor scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "What do I have to lose? Millions of dollars, that's what. And you expect me to trust a girl who lives on the streets?" Aaliyah's pulse raced. Fear clawed at her, but Maria's words echoed. "Don't let him silence you twice." Her voice trembled, but she forced it out. "I can fix it. I can save your jet." And you know deep down I'm telling the truth because last time I was right. A silence fell. Even the mechanics paused, glancing at each other uncertainly. Victor glared at her, pride and panic warring across his face. The pressure of the situation pressed heavy against him. He had investors waiting, millions on the line. For the first time, he couldn't simply laugh her away. Fine, he snapped. You think you know more than my engineers? Prove it. Aaliyah's chest rose with a shaky breath. The fear hadn't vanished, but for the first time, it didn't control her. The hangar buzzed with tension. Engineers huddled near the jet, their clipboards filled with notes that weren't solving the problem. Investors tapped impatiently on their watches, some muttering about delays, others already pulling out phones to reschedule deals. Victor paced, his jaw tight, and in the middle of it all stood Aaliyah, a girl in worn clothes and dirty sneakers, with nothing but her conviction. Victor folded his arms, his smirk sharp enough to cut glass. Well, show us, genius. Or are you just here to waste more of my time? Aaliyah stepped closer to the engine. Her heart hammered in her chest, but her hands were steady. She bent down, listening, then tapped lightly on the side panel. The whining sound told her everything she needed to know. It's the compressor valve, she said, her voice carrying over the room. It's jammed from a buildup. The engine can't get the airflow it needs. That's why it keeps cutting out. One of the engineers frowned. We checked that already. Then you didn't check it right, Aaliyah replied firmly. Because I can hear it. A ripple of laughter moved through the hangar. A girl with no degree telling trained men they'd missed something? To them, it was ridiculous. But Aaliyah didn't back down. Victor stepped closer, his voice dripping with mockery. And how exactly does a homeless girl with grease under her fingernails know more than men with certifications from top schools? Aaliyah turned her gaze on him, fire burning through her fear. Because engines don't care about degrees. Engines don't care about money. They speak in sounds, in patterns, in small shifts that most people don't notice. I've been listening to them my whole life. I know when they're hurting. The hangar grew quieter. Some of the mechanics shifted uncomfortably. There was something in her voice that didn't sound like arrogance. It sounded like truth. Maria, standing near the back, crossed her arms and called out, "What's the harm in letting her try? You've got nothing to lose, except maybe the deal you're about to blow." The investors exchanged glances. Pressure pushed down on Victor like a weight he couldn't shrug off. His pride screamed to laugh her out again, but the risk was too high. "Fine," he barked. 5 minutes. If you fail, you walk out and never come near me again." Aaliyah nodded, stepping up to the engine. The engineers hesitated before moving aside. Their skepticism was obvious, but their curiosity outweighed it. She rolled up her sleeves, revealing arms scarred by years of cuts and burns from working on broken-down cars. Her fingers moved with confidence, unfastening bolts, pulling back the panel, exposing the valve. She pointed to the clogged area coated in residue. "Here," she said, her voice steady. "This is your problem." One engineer bent down, squinting. His face paled. She was right. With a few quick adjustments, Aaliyah cleaned the blockage, reset the valve, and reassembled the panel. She stepped back, sweat shining on her forehead but her eyes bright with certainty. "Start it now," she instructed. Victor raised a brow. "You're giving orders now? Do you want this jet running or not?" She shot back, the room stilled. The pilot climbed into the cockpit, flipping switches. For a heartbeat, the silence was unbearable. Then with a roar, the engine came to life, smooth, steady, powerful. No stutter, no cough. Just strength, gasps rippled through the crowd. The investors who had been minutes away from leaving now leaned forward, stunned. Engineers exchanged shocked looks. Maria's smile widened, Victor's face hardened. His empire, his pride had just been saved. Not by his wealth, not by his experts, but by the girl he had mocked twice. One investor clapped slowly, breaking the silence. Another joined in. Soon the hangar filled with applause, not for Victor, but for Aaliyah. She stood tall, her chest rising with deep breaths. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. She wasn't a joke. She was undeniable. Victor stepped toward her, his voice low, forced through clenched teeth. "You got lucky." Aaliyah met his gaze, unflinching. "No, I got skilled. I got prepared. And I got tired of people like you telling me I'm nothing." The words cut through the air like a blade. Some of the investors nodded quietly. as if they had been waiting for someone to finally speak those truths aloud. Victor looked around, seeing how their eyes weren't on him anymore. For the first time in years, he wasn't the center. His arrogance, his money, had been overshadowed by the courage of a girl with nothing. The balance had shifted, and everyone in that hangar knew it. The applause in the hangar slowly faded, but its echo stayed in Aaliyah's chest. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not as a burden, not as a shadow, but as someone who mattered. She wiped her hands on her jeans, her pulse still racing. Victor stood stiffly, caught between fury and disbelief. His pride told him to brush it off, but the evidence roared louder than his voice. His jet was alive again because of her. One of the investors approached Aaliyah, offering a firm handshake. "Remarkable work," he said with genuine respect. "Where did you train?" Aaliyah hesitated, then lifted her chin. "I didn't. My father was a mechanic. I learned from him, and from fixing everything I could get my hands on." The man smiled. "Well, you've got talent that can't be taught." Maria stepped forward too, her eyes glowing with pride. "Told you she had something." Victor finally spoke, his words clipped. "I'll compensate you for your time." He pulled out a sleek wallet, holding out a thick stack of bills as though money could erase everything. Aaliyah looked at the cash, then back at him. Her voice was calm, steady, but unyielding. "I don't want your money. I want respect." The hangar fell silent. No one laughed. No one dismissed her. The girl who had once been silenced now owned the room with 6 simple words. Victor's jaw tightened, but he lowered the bills. For the first time, his eyes flickered with something other than arrogance. It wasn't kindness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of recognition. Later, as the night cooled and the jet prepared for its delayed takeoff, word of what happened began to spread. By morning, stories would circulate in headlines. Homeless black girl saves billionaire's fortune. Strangers would share her name. Opportunities would follow. An apprenticeship at a technical institute, offers of mentorship, doors she had once thought permanently closed. But for Aaliyah, the victory wasn't in the headlines. It was in standing tall when the world tried to push her down. It was in proving to herself most of all that her worth could never be measured by clothes, status, or wealth. As she walked out of the hangar, backpack slung over her shoulder, the sunrise stretched across the horizon. The city skyline glowed gold. No longer a wall keeping her out, but a horizon waiting to be claimed. Her father's words echoed in her heart, steady and true. "Your hands can build respect." And finally, she believed it. The city carried on as it always did, its towers glittering above, its alleys hiding countless unseen lives. But something had shifted beneath the surface. One night, one girl, one act of courage had bent the weight of prejudice, if only for a moment, and reminded everyone watching that dignity can rise from the most overlooked places. Aaliyah returned to her garage that evening with the same backpack she had always carried, but her spirit was different. She no longer looked at her reflection in broken glass and saw only a shadow. She saw possibility. She saw strength. For years she had believed that the world's silence defined her. But now she understood. Her voice had always mattered. It had only been waiting for the right moment to be heard. Victor Langston flew out later that night, his empire intact, his pride shaken. On the surface, he was still the billionaire, untouchable to most. But inside, he couldn't shake the image of the girl who had stood in the middle of his world and stripped him of control. Not with wealth, but with truth. It unsettled him. It forced him to see that the walls he had built between himself and people like her were weaker than he imagined. Whether he admitted it or not, he had been changed too. The story of what happened spread, carried by whispers at first, then by headlines. But long before the news gave her name weight, Aaliyah had already won the most important battle. She had reclaimed herself. Her journey wasn't over. Prejudice wouldn't vanish overnight. There would still be stares, still be voices that doubted her. But now she knew that resilience was more powerful than ridicule. That truth was louder than arrogance, and that even in a world built to keep her silent, she could rise. And perhaps that was the greatest victory of all, because dignity is not given. It is claimed. And once claimed, it cannot be taken back.